Hi, my name's Jack and welcome to another Kit Guru review. Today I'm taking a look at the Cooler Master CK721 65% wireless mechanical keyboard. The model I have here is the silver model that blends white and silver materials, and you can also get this in space grey. This tiny 65% keyboard retails for $129.99 in the UK, and in spite of its tiny size, it doesn't compromise on features offering mechanical switches, both wired and wireless modes, PC and Mac compatibility, and a ton of customizability. So let's get right into it. So looking at the box, there's nothing particularly special about it, but it does have a nice spot gloss covering the imagery, as well as some foil elements which look nice, and as you'd expect, the packaging follows Cooler Master's purple branding. Opening the box up, you're presented with a quick start guide, as well as a guide on removing the aluminium top plate, and yes, the top plate is removable, and we'll get to that later. Putting these to the side, we're presented with a keyboard which is covered by this plastic mould, and above that you get the included wrist rest made of foam. Now this has low friction cloth on top, similar to what you'd find on a mouse mat. Now when I tested this, I felt that the wrist rest was a little bit too high for the keyboard, and if anything made my wrists hurt using it, as the squared off edges just aren't comfortable at all. But obviously this is based on my experience, this might be fine for some of you. Lastly, in the box you get the keycap puller, a 1.8 meter USB Type-C to USB Type-A detachable braided cable, and a little extender device to use with the 2.4 GHz dongle. This extender works by plugging the USB cable provided in the box into one end, and then the 2.4 GHz dongle in the other end. This way you can bring the dongle closer to your keyboard for improved range and minimize the interference. It's nice to see this included. So this is actually my first time using a 65% keyboard, as I'm used to using TKL keyboards. Now Cooler Master has made sure that most of the keys you lose, such as function keys, are still available using FN and Shift combinations. And on this keyboard, the function key is this little Cooler Master logo. So for example, if you want to make your browser window go full screen by pressing F11, what you need to do is hold down the function key and press the minus button, because the minus button on this keyboard is mapped to F11. And that's it. Job done. Now the CK721 is PC and Mac compatible, and to switch between the two, all you need to do is hold down the function key and press the right shift key. The shift key flashes white for Mac mode and blue for Windows mode. Now it's worth noting that if you're using Windows and you want to use the media keys on this keyboard, you actually need to be in Mac mode to use them. Mac users will also be happy to know that the top row here of keys also double up as Mac shortcuts like brightness control, opening mission control, the media keys, and even an eject button. So even though this is a 65% keyboard, it's still pretty weighty, weighing around 764 grams. Now the CK721 measures 33.4 centimeters wide, 11.8 centimeters deep, and 3.7 centimeters high. So the top plate on this keyboard is sandblasted aluminium, and it's actually fully removable. The reason for this is that Cooler Master is planning to bring out some additional top plates so you can customize your keyboard even more. To take off the top plate, all you need to do is remove some of the keys from the right hand side of the keyboard, and then behind the little door for the wireless dongle, there's this little switch, you push it, and the top plate pops up. Now I'm not sure how many people are actually going to use this feature. If you're not interested in modifying your keyboard, you probably never will, and it does make me wonder if the build quality was compromised in any way to enable a feature like this. Although I do understand that this feature is specifically made for people who like modifying their keyboards and the sort of modding community, so if you're interested in that, then obviously this keyboard has something good to offer. But here's the thing, aluminium top plates usually mean more durability and a stronger build quality. Well, unfortunately this keyboard does have a lot of flex to it if you're willing to put some force behind it. Of course, this doesn't mean that the keyboard's going to just fall to bits. In fact, there's a lot of people out there that enjoy a keyboard with a bit of flex, so it doesn't feel so weird and uncomfortable when you bottom out the keys. So looking at the top of the keyboard, it has a pretty simplistic, stark, no-nonsense design. You do get this nice little three-way customizable dial, which has a machined piece of metal around the edge at the top. This looks pretty smart. Depending on what profile you're in, rotating it will either control the volume, skip tracks, control the LED brightness, or cycle through different LED modes. And changing profiles is done by just holding FN and pressing either Z, X, C, or V. I actually quite like this dial. It's a step dial, so you can actually feel each movement as you turn it round, but also it has a good amount of resistance, and you can also use it to click, so it has a click function, and you can fully customize the click function in the software. And by default, when pressed, this will mute your computer audio. Between the right shift and the top arrow key, there's also this micro perforated indicator light for caps lock and wireless status. This light is barely visible, and that's the point, to ensure a non-distracting experience. Turning the keyboard over, again a very stark design. It's incredibly subtle to the point where there basically is no design actually, except for this Cooler Master logo. You have 4 pretty small rubber pads to stop your keyboard from sliding around, as well as a couple of 2-step kickstands giving you the option to have your keyboard at 5, 8 or 10 degrees, depending on your preferred typing angle. On the right hand side of the keyboard you have the mode switch, so you can switch between 2.4 GHz wireless, wired and Bluetooth modes. In Bluetooth mode, which uses Bluetooth 5.1, you can connect up to 3 devices and switch between them by holding FN and pressing delete, page up or page down. This is great if you have multiple devices that you want to use with this keyboard, say a MacBook Air, your phone, an iPad or something like that. It's worth noting that when you're in Bluetooth mode, there are a few compromises. You do only get 125Hz polling rate, you only get 8 milliseconds response time, and you only get 6 key rollover. Whereas when you're in wired and 2.4 GHz wireless mode, you get the full 1000Hz polling rate, which is 1 millisecond response time, and you also get full N key rollover. For gamers, you're going to want to use this in 2.4 GHz wireless mode or wired mode for the least latency. And finally, on the left hand side, you have this little plastic door, and inside you'll find the 2.4 GHz dongle, as well as a little switch to pop up the top plate. I'd have rather have seen this door on the back of the keyboard or underneath or something, because it's so obvious on the left hand side and it just doesn't look that nice. But it's not a big deal and it doesn't really affect the performance of the keyboard in any way. Now before I get into the keycaps and switches, let's talk a little bit about the battery life. So the keyboard features a 2000 mAh battery, which to be honest isn't that big of a battery in a wireless keyboard that has all of this RGB as well. If you're in Bluetooth mode, the keyboard should last around 73 hours if you don't have any LEDs on, and 14 hours if you're using 2.4 GHz wireless. I've been using this keyboard in 2.4 GHz mode with full LED brightness, and after about 6 hours use, I've got about 40% battery left, so that should give you an idea of the battery life when you're using 2.4 GHz and full brightness. Although I am using power saving modes, so when I'm not using the keyboard for a set amount of time, it does turn itself off or go into like a kind of sleep, so that does help to preserve the battery life. Now something that I don't like about the keyboard is that so far I haven't found any way to be able to see how much battery life I've got left. So on most keyboards, if they're wireless, there's usually a function combination, you press FN and something, and it will blink to show you how much battery life is left. Usually 4 blinks will be in 25% ranges, right? So it will blink once, that means you've got 25% battery, blink twice, 50%, etc. But with this keyboard, I've not found any of that. So that's a bit disappointing because with a wireless keyboard, surely you're going to want to know how much battery life you've got before it just dies or before it already tells you it's on a low battery. So far, the only indicator I found when it's running low on battery is a little red light, as well as a red light when it's actually plugged in charging. This seems like a huge oversight to me anyway. For a lot of people that want to use this wirelessly, I think this is going to be an issue. So the keycaps on the CK721 are ABS plastic. They have a pretty decent font, nothing too gamery, and in general look pretty good, and the backlight shines through brightly. These are side laser etched, and you can actually feel the icons on the keys. I don't know if this is actually intentional or if it's just like a design issue, but I don't mind it. I will say though that this definitely isn't the brightest keyboard when it comes to backlighting. I found the RGB overall a little bit dim. There's also a few colour inconsistencies, so looking at the 3 and 4 here, and I'm hoping my camera picks this up, you can see that the backlight almost looks like a different colour. It's only really noticeable when you use the white backlight, but still. I mentioned earlier that Cooler Master's planning on bringing out different coloured top plates, while they're also planning on bringing out some PBT keycaps as well. This will be great if you want to improve the longevity of your keyboard, but to be honest, these ABS keycaps will last a long time anyway. Although considering this is a £129.99 keyboard, to be honest I would like to see PBT keycaps. The CK721 has TTC mechanical switches, and you can either have red, blue or brown. These switches are rated for 50 million key presses, and I've got to say that I actually really enjoy typing on these. TTC as a brand isn't as well known as Cherry or Kale, but they still make some pretty good switches. The red linear switches that I have in this keyboard have 4mm of travel, 45g force of actuation, and 2mm actuation point, and less than 5 millisecond debounce time, so they're very close to Cherry Red overall. Typing on this keyboard feels really good. Of all the keyboards I've tested recently, this has to be one of the best keyboards as I've not had any issues with mistyping. They're also pretty quiet as well. For gaming, I really appreciate the small form factor of the keyboard, and I haven't had any issues locating certain keys. I found the switch movement to be responsive and fast, and overall it's been great to use. My only criticism would be that the keys do have a fair amount of wobble to them, but this is pretty standard on most switch types anyway. And here's a quick sound test. So moving on to the RGB on this keyboard, it's actually pretty good, but as I said, it's not that bright. Changing the RGB on this keyboard can be done either with keyboard shortcuts or through the software. There are tons of customizability options with this keyboard. There's loads of stuff in the quick start guide to talk you through all the different key combinations. There's probably a few too many for me to go through in this video, and even to wrap my head around, to be honest. One thing I do like is that you can change the red, green, and blue values independently, which is something you don't see on many keyboards. So for example, if you start with a red hue and you add a little bit more blue, it should start to go purple. Again, really nice to see this in a keyboard because usually you just get a sort of preset colors. For those of you who like your animations, there's 20 different animations in this keyboard. To go through them, just hold the FN key and press T and you'll just start cycling through all the different modes. Like many other keyboards at this price point, the CK721 does allow you to record on-the-fly macros, and you can record either single loop, infinite loop, or repeated macros. Macros aren't really something that I do that often, but if you're someone that does utilize macros, then I'm sure you're going to be happy that this is included. You can even add custom LED backlighting on this keyboard just from the keyboard itself, so no software needed. But again, it's pretty complicated and it's not easy to get the perfect lighting you want, but customizing the LEDs is so much easier if you just get the software. The CK721 can be changed pretty much any way you want in the Master Plus software, but I will say before we get into it, the software is really clunky, and I think that Cooler Master has a lot of work to do to kind of get this up to the level of competing manufacturers. I mean, I can't even resize the window, which is something I think any basic app should let you do. It's not even just that either, the UI as well is kind of all over the place. But let's take a look at it. The first tab is the wireless settings, so sleep and low power options. This is great for preserving battery life, and you can customize it pretty much however you like. The next tab is the lighting tab, and from here you have a bunch of preset animations. Now it's worth noting that when I actually first opened this software, there were only about 5 or 6 different presets, which I didn't understand because the keyboard has loads. Turns out you actually need to cycle through all of the modes manually on the keyboard first by holding FN and pressing T, and then it will start coming up on the software. Really weird to me that you have to do that, because most people would get this software and just think, well, hold on, why have I only got like 6 different options? But once you do it, you get all of them, and it's a really strange thing, but, you know, I think this is probably just a bug that Cooler Master needs to fix, but if you haven't seen it yet, then you know about it now. Now, this keyboard does support per key RGB lighting, and there is a custom option here in the software, but there's just one issue with it, that deleting a color isn't as easy as you might expect. So usually on most software, if you have a color on a key, there's usually like a delete or reset, or you can clear it so there's no color on the key anymore. From here, it doesn't seem like there is. What I found out is that you actually need to type in 000 on the RGB section down here on the bottom left, and then attribute that to the key, so the key actually gets given no color, rather than taking a color off it. This would be so much easier from a UI perspective if there was just like a delete button or a clear button, or I don't know, remove light or remove RGB or something, just to make it easier for people to understand. Coming from someone who uses apps every single day, this is just confusing for me, but as you can see, there's a bunch of different options here. You can customize the colors. Still some great options, but I just wish they were a little bit easier to use. Next, we have the key mapping tab, and again, really confusing to be quite honest. You can select each key and add new options like shortcuts, macros, disable the keys entirely, but the UI is so confusing and I really don't understand how to navigate any of these options. So I don't really understand how to use it, but it's there if you can figure it out. Next, we have the macro tab, and again, I think you're seeing the picture now with what I'm getting at. This UI is just so confusing, and for someone who doesn't use things like this much anyway, I don't really record that many macros, this whole user interface is just complicated to me. There's no kind of introduction on how to do it, there's no sort of guide to talk you through each section of this macro recording page. You just land on it and you're just supposed to know how it works. Next, we have the profiles tab, and this one's a bit easier, I guess. It's a bit more straightforward. You can rename, import, export, and the UI is just, well, you get the idea. And that's pretty much it for the software. You know, I think this needs a huge overhaul. It feels like the person that designed this software has never designed an app before, or has never used one, because from my perspective, if I get a new keyboard and I don't really know how to use any of the functions, the first thing I want to know in the software is how to use all these options. But there's nothing in here. There's no information. There's just nothing. You're just kind of thrown in at the deep end, figure it out yourself. So Cooler Master, I'm begging you, please improve this UI. Add some tooltips so people can understand what things mean, because at the moment it's really confusing. So in all, I think the Cooler Master CK721 is a capable keyboard, let down by frankly awful software. I think the $129.99 price point is okay, but again, let down by this half-baked software. Obviously, there's a lot of people that don't use software at all when it comes to their peripherals. If you're not planning on installing the software, then none of this is going to be a problem. But I do think that, you know, it's nice to have that option if you do want to do some more stuff with your keyboard, to use an app that actually works. I do think the aluminium top plate is a cool idea, and I'm excited to see what Cooler Master brings out in the future to customize the keyboard. Using this day in and day out, the keyboard does have a great typing experience, one of the best on any keyboard I've used recently, with little to no mistyping, and for gaming, the switches are fast and responsive, and they're quiet enough that they won't disturb anyone if you want to use this in a workspace. Based purely on the typing experience, this is a pretty good keyboard and I have enjoyed using it. But is that going to be enough to make you buy it? And that's it for my review of the Cooler Master CK721 keyboard. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, it really helps out the Kit Guru channel. If you want to see more from us, be sure to subscribe and hit that little bell icon as well, and you'll be notified when Kit Guru uploads another video. Check us out on social media for the latest updates, and you can support us on Patreon for exclusive content. My name's Jack, you've been watching Kit Guru, and I'll see you in the next one.